All right, so today we are diving into a film that seems to be uh, pretty much everywhere I look.
Yeah, seems like it.
Anora. You sent over some articles about this movie, and I've got to say, I'm interested to
Yeah.
I'm interested to dig in here.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this film, Anora, is taking this classic Cinderella story and like
Yeah,
putting it into this modern, kind of gritty setting.
yeah, and it seems like Sean Baker, the director, is really blending comedy, drama, and even romance all
Hmm.
together in
Right.
in this one film. What do you think about that kind of unexpected mix? Do you think that's maybe part of what's getting so much attention?
Yeah, I think that definitely plays a role. But I think it's also how he's using those different genres to explore, some complex themes, particularly around sex work and
Yeah.
and societal expectation.
For sure. And speaking of that, Mikey Madison's performance as Anora, the main
Yeah.
character, everyone seems to be saying really great things about it, calling it a breakout role,
Oh.
captivating.
Yeah, and I think her performance is really adding a layer of depth to the film. A strong performance can really like make or break a film. If the audience doesn't connect with the character,
Right.
then the whole story just falls flat. From what I'm reading, Madison's portrayal is really resonating with people.
One of the things that really stood out to me, just even reading the articles, was how Anora portrays sex work. And it seems like they really went to great lengths to make sure it was authentic, even hiring sex workers as consultants and cast members.
Yeah, and that's refreshing to see a film taking that approach. For so long, stories about sex work have been relying on stereotypes and sensationalism, and
Yeah.
by bringing in people with
Yeah.
lived experience, Honora, has this potential to challenge those notions and present a more nuanced perspective.
I think that makes a lot of sense. But I did see some articles that mentioned that it felt like the film was still maybe perpetuating some tropes,
Hmm.
like the idea of sex workers needing to be rescued.
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting, right? I think that just highlights this tightrope walk that filmmakers face when they're tackling sensitive subjects. And while Honora clearly makes an effort to portray sex work realistically, it's important to ask if it really escapes, those stereotypical narratives that are so ingrained in our culture.
For sure, yeah. And speaking of things that are ingrained in our culture, Anora won the Palme d'Or at Cannes this year, which is a
Big deal.
really big deal. And, I was looking into some of the articles that you sent. Major publications are consistently ranking this among the best films of 2024.
Yeah, those accolades put Honora on the map. But I think beyond the awards, what's significant is that the film is generating this debate and discussion, right?
Hmm.
Pushing audiences to kind of confront their own biases and expectations. It's not just entertainment, it's like this cultural touchstone.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's definitely more than just a feel-good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing that I saw kind of coming up over and over in these articles is this discussion about Honori's character development.
Yeah.
Some critics felt that while she's well developed, in terms of her work,
Yeah.
that maybe the film could have explored her life outside of that realm more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a valid criticism?
I think it's a really interesting point. On the one hand, it's great to see a film that doesn't shy away from the realities of sex work. But on the other hand, does focusing solely on that aspect of Ani's life,
Yeah.
does it limit our understanding of her as like a complete person?
Right.
Does it risk defining her solely by her profession?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how often we kind of put people in boxes based on their job,
Yeah,
especially if those jobs are considered taboo or controversial.
for sure.
Do you think that that's what's happening with Ani's character? Are we, the audience, kind of guilty of projecting our own biases?
It's definitely something to consider. And, this ties back to what we were saying before about challenging stereotypes.
Yeah.
And while Anora, attempts to break down some of those barriers surrounding sex work, it also raises questions about whether it inadvertently reinforces others.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got all these layers then, right?
Yeah.
Of representation, how we perceive characters whose lives are really intertwined with their work.
Yeah.
And then, to make things even more complex, there's the ending,
Right.
which seems to be dividing audiences. Some people feel like it doesn't quite align with those themes of empowerment and survival that we see throughout the rest of the film.
Yeah. And I actually saw some critics arguing the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that the ending, while ambiguous, is precisely what makes it so powerful. They argued that it forces the viewer to confront the complexities of Ossie's situation and to grapple with the fact that there aren't always easy answers or neat resolutions.
Wow. So even the ending has like multiple interpretations.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think it speaks to the film's overall strength. I mean, Anora isn't trying to, spoon feed the audience a simple message. It's presenting this nuanced and thought-provoking exploration of a complex issue. And it's leaving room for different perspectives.
And that's what makes this deep dive so engaging, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about summarizing the plot or listing out accolades. It's
Yeah.
about like digging deeper, exploring those layers of meaning, the questions it raises.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that art, especially good art, isn't always neat and tidy.
Yeah.
It can be messy, contradictory, and open to interpretation.
And I think that's a really important point to make to you, our listener. Have you ever watched a film or read a book that left you with more questions than answers?
Yeah.
A story that challenged your assumptions and made you kind of reevaluate your own perspective? It seems like Anora is doing that for a lot of people.
For sure. And those are the stories that stay with us long after the credits roll.
Right.
The ones that spark those conversations and make us think differently about the world.
Okay, so we've talked about the good, the bad, and the controversial when it comes to Anora. But before we wrap things up, there's something that's been kind of weighing on my mind. We've been discussing this film's portrayal of sex work, and I can't help but think about, the larger societal context surrounding this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And we often hear about the exploitation and dangers associated with the profession. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts on how Anora navigates that aspect?
Mm-hmm.
Does it contribute to a more empathetic understanding of those issues, or do you think it falls short?
That's a really crucial point to consider, and the film's approach seems to be generating mixed reactions. Some viewers appreciate that it doesn't shy away from the difficult realities, while others feel it could have done more to highlight those systemic issues that often contribute to those very realities.
So it's not like a simple black and white situation.
Yeah.
Which I guess reflects the complexity of the issue itself.
Yeah.
Do you think it's even possible for a film to fully encapsulate all sides of such a multifaceted and often controversial topic?
That's a great question, and honestly, I don't think there's an easy answer. But what's important, I believe, is that Anora is sparking this conversation. It's pushing us to think critically about, the ways in which we portray and perceive sex work, and to consider the human stories behind the headlines and stereotypes.
I like that. It's about recognizing the humanity, the individual stories within a larger societal context. And that kind of brings us back to Anora as a whole. We talked about the praise, the criticism, the debate surrounding its portrayal of sex work, the characters, and even the ambiguous ending. Where do you think this leaves us? What can we as viewers take away from this film?
For me, Anora serves as this reminder that the best stories often leave us with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
It's a film that challenges us to confront our own biases, to grapple with those complex issues, and ultimately to kind of embrace the ambiguity of life itself. There's no neat resolution, no simple takeaway message, and perhaps that's where its true power lies.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with this. Anora is more than just a movie. It's a conversation starter, a mirror reflecting our own perceptions and biases, and an invitation to engage with a topic that often gets swept under the rug. Whether you agree with the film's choices or not, it's undeniably a film that makes you think, feel, and question. And in a world that's so saturated with, easily digestible content,
Right.
that's a rare and valuable thing.
Absolutely. Anora doesn't offer solutions or easy answers, but it does offer this powerful and thought-provoking glimpse into a world that is often misunderstood and misrepresented. And sometimes that's all it takes to ignite a spark of curiosity, empathy, and a desire to learn more.
Perfectly said. So if you haven't seen Anora yet, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's a film that will stay with you long after the credits roll, prompting you to question, reflect, and maybe even see the world in a new light. And until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.